Booey.
Baba Booey.
Baba Booey. So you watched Mandy.
I did. I finally got around to watching Mandy.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that more last time, but I was like, maybe we definitely should save it for the fucking formal discussion. What did you think about Mandy?
So, it was... I really liked it. I feel like it was... it's definitely a pretty imbalanced movie, as far as things go. Like, funny enough, Mandy's death takes place at exactly the halfway mark of the movie.
Pretty precisely fucking
Precise, precisionally laid in there.
I was hoping you'd notice that. It's fucking so... it's evenly fucking in bite-sized chunks how the film rolls out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Building up to Vengeance part and second part where he starts hunting down and makes the fucking crazy axe, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The knight's axe and goes into the dragon's lair is the third chapter.
Yeah. And so that was a clue to me that I was like, okay, everything in here has some kind of reason for being there.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say
that
so.
Even down to just the timing, the way he edited this film and stuff to get the timing right. There's intention behind everything, and so that alone definitely makes it worth a second look. Because a lot of times people, their first run through and stuff, they'll get through that, the first hour, and they'll be just like, what was that? That was a whole lot of...
Say, like,
come on, I'm waiting for crazy cage rage and murder mayhem.
The second time I watched it was definitely like I enjoyed it even more.
Yeah,
because I was like, it comes at you so fast when you watch it the first time,
mm-hmm.
but your brain can sense the pattern and the synchronicity of the timing.
Yeah,
because it's fucking very evenly. The first fucking 30 cleanly explains the characters, everything's set up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And so cleanly and efficiently. And then the event happens, the murder of his girlfriend, Mandy. And then things steamroll, and it goes in chapters as it goes, and then the falling down. You get your crazy rage cage after that point. And then he backs off. You know what I mean? So,
mm-hmm.
he came in with clear purpose, and so did the director. And Cage was definitely, on board the whole time with the vision of this one, dude. Because he never did anything over the top. He was just fucking cruising through the film. And I fucking loved it. And it's definitely worth watching again. Because the second time I watched it, I was like fucking digging it even
that to
more.
me is just always a point in a movie's favor if it lends itself to multiple viewings.
It does. And this is definitely one of those. That's how I felt about Annihilation also. Because I watched Annihilation immediately after watching it the first time. Because all of a sudden I was like... My God, you fucking start putting pieces together.
Yeah, there's so much more
and you're
to this.
Holy fuck, and I've watched it 3 times.
Yeah.
In the same day. Because I was, all of a sudden I would connect different pieces. And they all lead to Rome, they all go to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how they fit in different facets. And they have multiple levels of Annihilation that fucking run the theme all the way through.
Yeah.
Mandy is one of those, I feel like it's fucking super underappreciated. Because it's hard to access it.
Yeah.
It's on Shudder.
Yeah, it's very narrowly accessed. It's all on. Yeah, it's only on Shudder.
People were getting a hold of DVDs and stuff and spreading it around like they used to. This thing would be way bigger.
Yeah, I could see this one having, in the days of movie rental, that this would be like a movie rental blockbuster cult
I think it would be a fucking Titan. Yeah, I think it would be a Titan. Definitely, have its own little corner piece where people were to go find it, multiple copies for a long period of time. I loved it because it wasn't. Not only did it because it's set in the 80s, 89 or something.
83
or 83 or something like that.
Yeah,
really
this is the one date that they really throw out there.
But it wasn't. They weren't ramming fucking nostalgia down my fucking throat the whole time, so it felt fucking more real than most of these other nostalgia 80s.
Well, because there's a lot of things in it that are just kind of homages to stuff in the 80s, but it's not actual...
And it's not rubbing it in your face.
They're not rubbing it in your face. Something as simple as Kraft macaroni and cheese. They even came up with their own alternative corollary to it.
The goddamn Cheddar Goblin's my favorite part of the whole movie. That's
But that's just kind of coloring. You're just yes, this is a world that you recognize, but it's not your world.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
So I heard about this film... because of Red Letter, who was Jay Berman or whatever was talking about it on Red Letter.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the only reason I signed up for Shudder, because he was like, oh, it's an all horror streaming service. He wasn't like paid by them or anything. It's something that he pays for on his own. And like I keep meaning to cancel it. I got it to watch Mandy,
which stands out because Red Letter really likes to shit on streaming services, subscription services, and things.
They do. Shudder is different, and I think it's special because every time I go back to cancel it, there's something that I want to watch that I'm like, fuck, they got me. Like that's something. There's something in the back reaches that I've always wanted to watch, or some weird cult classic or weird film.
Something that most other services would never even bother to get the license
Strange
for or anything.
Independent films and stuff like that. Just foreign films that are hardly translated, you know what I mean, that come over, just weird, interesting. So a lot of stuff from South Korea. There's a lot of interesting, not just horror. They do a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a horror service, and like that's their mainline thing, but it's the weird shit that they bring in that keeps me like going like fuck. Like they had In the Mouth of Madness. You watch that also.
Yep.
They have their originals. Mandy is what brought me in. I haven't watched a lot of the other ones. Yeah, we watched Lizzie. We started Lizzie Borden. It's the story of Lizzie Borden.
Oh, okay, yeah. Axe murderer.
The axe murderer, and it's a decent story. It starts with Kirsten Stewart's in it, and Lionsgate produced it. So it's like high production value.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't think you'd find something like that on Shudder. It looks like nothing when you sign up for it or use it. You know what I mean? And same with Mandy. It's so fucking thoroughly and surgically well put together that it's off-putting on where you found it, because it's off the fucking beaten path.
Right.
It's almost like a Netflix production, but it's too good to be something from Netflix. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't I don't know. It was just definitely a passion project, but Shudder let it exist for what it was. It didn't seem like there was any outside interference on the film at all. It was just this director's vision on what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's like the surgical purity, like the fucking sterility of what he wanted is in that film. You know what I mean? And I really dug it for that reason, because it's so unique, yet familiar, like other slashers and stuff from the 80s. But the story is so different. And this director does stuff like that, where he does like a Lovecraftian vibe to a couple of his things. Because he did The Color of Space, which you lent me.
I don't think that was the same director. I think it was the same set of producers.
Same producers.
It was a different director.
I don't know who the director's a different guy, because I think Nick Cage is friends with the director.
Yeah.
Which is why I agreed to be in Mandy.
Well, it was interesting because did you ever see Shudder also has the behind-the-scenes documentary for Mandy?
No, I didn't see that. No shit. Fuck.
Yeah, so I went and sat down and watched that. It's really easy. It's like a 22-minute.
No shit. Is it fucking cool, though?
It is cool.
Oh,
it is
man.
cool because it's so it was Elijah Wood and a couple other guys produced
They
Mandy.
did a podcast for Shudder that I have run through a little bit.
Yeah, and so they were... what was it? They saw the director Panos Cosmatos' first film, which was what was it, like the Out of the Black Rainbow or something? It's a weird avant-garde title, and looks like a very weird avant-garde film. But they still have yet to see it. But now, because of Saw Mandy and stuff, now I'm interested in checking it out. But,
yeah, dude.
But they saw it and they were like, we need to get this guy, and so they just like made a deal with him. They're like, we'll produce your next movie, like sight unseen, like whatever your next movie is, we're paying for it. Like you don't even have, we know you don't even have a script yet or anything and stuff. You don't even have a script to show us, but like we're so interested in like your vision and the kind of stuff that you like doing that we want to support that.
That's really interesting, because I get that from the spirit of that they're producing. They want to produce stuff, but they're kind of doing it like Netflix, but they're picking people that have that are fucking different, because Netflix will fucking take anybody that'll fucking show
just
up,
anything, because the risk on their side is pretty low.
Yeah, but with Shudder, like to fucking pick somebody like that to fucking, they're not that even well known. People don't even know what Shudder is.
No.
I let my roommates take my password too. I'll give it to anybody to check it out. You know what I mean? If you want to check it out, because I was like, I was going to cancel it, but I was like, they got a bunch of John Carpenter stuff on there, and Friday the 13th. I'm happy.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things about the movie was it lends itself to a lot of interpretation of the plot itself. of is it a corollary to different things. It was interesting to go online after watching it the first time and kind of seeing what other people thought, what they were interpreting, because there's a lot of weird stuff in there that isn't like explicitly explained.
I have not. Well, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah,
it's like they don't fucking hold your hand through the whole movie.
Yeah,
which is usually
a
problem I have with most directors, because they will. Somebody and it's not the director, it's the fucking producer or somebody. You have to dumb it down and explain to the fucking people.
There's no interstellar, it was love, Murph moments.
An ADR line afterwards where he's like, let me
explain what all of this means. Just in case you fucking dickheads
weren't paying attention for the last 2 hours. It was love. Yeah.
No, you get no moments like that in this. Everything is... all of the dialogue is told in such a just an indirect way. I think is the best way to describe it. There is a bit of foreshadowing though in one of the early scenes,
right?
Where let's see, it's Red and Mandy. They're laying in bed together. He asks her like what she was doing during her day, and she talks about how she was reading an astronomy book. And he asks her like what her favorite planet is, and she just says, Jupiter, talking about how it's just big and its entire surface is nothing but a storm, and there's a hurricane running on it that can swallow the swallow the Earth, and then so that part itself wasn't so much, but it was a setup for something to establish Red's character, right? Because I was trying to look into kind of Jupiter and stuff, and I was like, is there anything here that kind of, I was like, no, nothing that really fits. It's just she's genuinely giving her thoughts on it and stuff, so I don't think that's so much a reflection of her character. But then it's what Red says afterwards, and this movie's very Freudian in some of the things that these characters say and kind of what they're saying, what it says about themselves. And so his answer, when she asks him what his favorite planet is, he says Saturn, which was really interesting. And so I looked up Saturn, and the symbolism of Saturn is the Grim Reaper.
That's fair. Okay.
And actually,
the
astrological symbol of Saturn.
You got to get way
sickle.
deeper into.
Yeah, I got deep into this.
Wow, dude. It makes me want to go back and check it out again, because I usually do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the astrological symbol of Saturn is a sickle, is a reaper.
Right.
Which is what his weapon is. You got to point your mic at you, and so I'm getting.
Has it got a weird feedback? Okay.
Well, no, just weird. It sounds like you're talking in another room.
I'm talking in the other room, folks. I don't do podcasts directly anymore. Go on. But as you were saying,
we're doing social distancing here, talking from different rooms.
I'm talking through a mask.
But so there's that. But then he also, after she starts talking about Saturn, how it's one of the first discovered planets, and how it has all kinds of mythology around it, he decides, half jokingly to change his mind, and he chooses Galactus,
right?
Being, of course, the Marvel villain,
the fucking Eater of Worlds,
the Eater of Worlds, and stuff. Which it's just like taking things between Saturn and Galactus, symbolically not very different,
right? He's
kind of staying in his lane,
and it's definitely
his own character.
There are blueprints to this movie that, if you... Because, I watched it on the first time, and I did... It's been so long since I watched it the first time, too. So, I went through a refresher recently, but I watched it with other people, so I couldn't sit there and, fucking hard-nose it and take it apart like I like to. Because, usually if I watch a film by myself, I'm on my phone back and forth, typing stuff up and looking stuff up while I'm going through the movie. If it's a movie like this, there's a lot of shit to dig through, which I fucking... I dig, and you got to fucking really dig. I'll look up, the first thing I'll do is IMDb it and start looking through budget and production and who is connected to this and that. What is this other person connected to? And I like starting there. I didn't get to do any of this with that movie, but it's there. It's not that I didn't see it because you can sense it. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's not done in a way where it's I guess some people could be left in the dark. You know what I mean? Where they'll look at it and be like, well, I fucking don't like scenes. I can't interpret. Some people have to have their fucking hand held all the time. There are people out there that cannot.
And this is not a hand-holding movie.
It's not,
But even then, if you're not looking for any of the deeper symbolism, there's a lot there just
and it was
already to enjoy.
That was my first viewing.
It's a very straightforward revenge story.
It had a feeling almost like semi Evil Dead mixed with I Spit on Your Grave. There was so many vibes, and so many different energies to the film, which I fucking really vibed with, because it has. You mentioned a Crystal Lake reference.
The Crystal Lake reference.
They mentioned the Friday the 13th thing, but there's so many vibes to other films.
Yeah.
And it's like a romantic wink and love letter to these other types of movies in the 70s. Like I Spit on Your Grave was, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a revenge story. Have you familiar with I Spit on Your Grave?
Not.
It was bombed by critics when it came out, because it depicted the gang rape of this young lady, and she goes back and piece by piece hunts down each of the guys that raped her and tortures and murders them in weird and worse ways as the film goes on. It was panned by critics, and fucking people were like, oh, I fucking hate this movie because this and that. But there was people really love that movie because it was so fucking cowboy when they made it.
Right.
It's such the idea of even depicting a brutal, horrible rape in a film, and the woman being the main character who goes back and gets her own revenge. There's no Walking Tall moment where the man shows up on the white horse to save her. She does it on her own.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting and weird concept on these kinds of movies back at the time. And they remade it recently, but the original one's so gonzo in how they fucking put it together. And there's themes kind of like that, man, where it feels like that cowboy style of fucking filmmaking that they were doing back then, where it's just the producers would just give them the money and go back to their office and do coke and let them make the fucking money, dude, and not they let them fucking release it like Texas Chainsaw Massacre back in the day, where it looks like this guerrilla style filmed.
Right.
If you've seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, people hate it because it's fucking filmed so fucking aggressively. The camera moves and shakes, and they're running with the camera, no rig, no tracking shots. It's punk style.
It's very it's a very punk style film. Yeah.
And I love it because it's so fucking guttural, man, and it's
just aggressive. Yeah.
And the other ones are not like that, which is really what destroyed the charm of the film for me. But the first one is so grindhouse and just that cowboy maverick style filmmaking, that people just went out with a fucking vision on how to make this movie, and we're like, fuck it, we'll make it however we can make it, you know what I mean? And they put together a damn decent film in the end. Mandy feels like that, but it is and it isn't. Like I said, it fucking has winks and nods to those things, but it's so precise as it rolls through the film. And there's rolling points as it goes.
Well, and there's so many. The guy uses so much iconography of just, especially of Christian interpretations of evil.
Right.
There's a severe darkness to the characters in this movie.
Yeah, to everybody.
Everybody, except for maybe Mandy.
Yeah, and maybe the guy in the trailer. What's his name? He's
yeah,
Predator. What's his name? Fuck, you know what I'm talking about. He was great in this, and he's just a bit part. He has his crossbow, and he's like, I made you something special. It's up in there in that cabinet right there, and he fucking gives them the crazy
broadheads,
to fucking kill these super mutants. You know what I mean? LSD super mutants in the woods.
But
and he's the one who sets he's your sage-like dude that
sets
you
on your path. Yeah,
who knows of these creatures that he's hunting and stuff. Sends the valiant knight to go into the dragon's den. You know what I mean? Because it has she's reading that fantasy book like you're talking about in the beginning, and
I wasn't able to draw a whole lot, except that it goes back and refers. And I was trying to see if that book was real, and it's not.
It's just set up for the film.
It's just set up for the film, but yeah, she's reading a fantasy book about a character, basically.
It's like a wizard or something.
It's like a wizard or a warlock character or something, and they get a hold of an object of power or something and stuff, and it's only ever really referred back to again later on in one of Red's dream sequences.
Right.
And so I was trying to figure out kind of what that was in reference to, but I couldn't really. I kind of hit a dead end on that one.
For me, I think it just sets the mode. Like I said, I saw things differently from you did.
Yeah.
I love the underlying stuff because the astrology. I'm not familiar with astrology a whole lot.
I wasn't really either.
If you follow it, you can dig into it, right?
Yeah.
And like anybody who is into astrology can fucking be, oh, that's what this means and this and that. So there's a lot of shit going on there. But for me, the fantasy book helped set the mode for, like when you begin like a D&D campaign or something, you have fucking little bit of world building.
Right.
Kind of stuff. So for me, it set like a fantasy setting, like veil over the fucking thing. So what it does, because he fucking begins this quest of revenge. It's very much fantasy related because he fucking makes a fantasy Reaper's axe. He makes and forges his own weapon and uses medieval style weapons to hunt them down.
He's collecting his tools to exact his revenge.
And he doesn't go get a gun or anything like that. He takes a crossbow, and these are like medieval like knight weapons.
Yeah.
And goes to hunt these fucking wretched beasts down, right? So it's like, for me, it was just setting that vibe is all it really was. It's like setting this fantasy vibe for a fantasy type element to the film, which is what's portrayed to me like through the rest of it, you know what I mean? Because as he works his way through these dungeons or the LSD crack house,
there's
and
a
stuff.
lot of kind of biblical aspects to it as well. The Black Skulls, the LSD bikers are the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
That's fair.
They're called forward, by the sound of a horn, which is a direct reference to Revelations.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great scene in the movie because they just appear out of the fucking
out of the darkness,
out of the dark, out of the red light,
yeah.
summoned by the horn. There's multiple levels to that shit, man.
Well, and then you've got the Children of the New Dawn, the cult that kills Mandy. They're all supposed to be kind of different personifications of the weaknesses of men.
I got a very Manson vibe.
Well, there's a Manson vibe to it,
right.
but also you look at the structure of the group, and it's the 7 deadly sins.
That's fair. Break it down for me.
All right, so Jeremiah Sands, main guy, he's Pride.
Right, I can see that.
Pretty obvious. The ratchet old lady, she's Lust.
I guess she has that moment of exposition in the film where she talks about being a great lover to him and stuff like that. That's fair. I can give you that.
There's Swan and the mullet guy, the blonde mullet guy. They're both greed and envy.
Yeah, he was great too. He was a great like weird side character.
Yeah, Swan was. Yeah. Envy, you can tell because think about like when he was killed, when he gets the sickle axe thrown at his head, he's waxing down his car, basically coveting his own possessions.
Right, that's
things.
fair. I didn't fucking think about that, man. That's a fucking hell of a way to fucking set that.
The girl is Sloth, and the guy that he has the chainsaw fight with is Wrath.
That's fair. That's fair.
And then the guy that they sacrifice to the Black Skulls, he's the fat kid. He's Gluttony.
Yeah, and he fucking had... He had the people were like, "Who the fuck is he?" I was like, "He's just some fucking dude that was with him, bro." But the devil took him. Like the creatures came. I love that scene because he's like,
dragged off into the darkness. Dragged
like
into hell.
It's done very specifically.
Yeah.
You get a whole couple of seconds to linger on it too. You know what I mean? I didn't think about equating that to these characters. Like I said, fucking. To me, I got such a heavy fantasy vibe, but it's now. That adds a whole nother level to it to me because the whole quest through the 7 deadly sins, and then it ends with he's like, because he tells him the final line is like, "I'm your god now."
I'm your god now. Well, and then also Jeremiah Sands himself, there are layers to the way he set up these characters. There's a lot of Antichrist imagery with Jeremiah Sands.
Right, and that's kind of what I got from. And that's what I got from the for the Manson stuff, because Manson was always like, "I'm the devil and God." He believed he was the Antichrist for the most part too, which is where I stopped it at, because I was like, he wants to have a record label. They were talking, he has his own record, and stuff, which is a reference.
Do you remember what he compared his music to? Who he compared his music to?
One of the Beach Boys. No. Who is it?
The Carpenters.
The Carpenters, yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember that now.
So that's a he says that his music is, better than the Carpenters.
If I'm fucking blending the two together, I'm also reading a book on the
on
Manson trials.
Yeah.
So if I'm that's definitely in the backdrop of my mind,
right.
equating most of these things too.
Which, yeah, Manson himself was also a failed musician.
He did, yeah. The Beach Boys took one of his songs and changed some of the lyrics around and didn't credit him, which supposedly spawned this whole
dejected,
Helter Skelter event. You know what I mean? He got really into the Beatles' White Album after that, and started applying race war stuff to it.
Right.
I got a heavy vibe of that from it, which is definitely an influence.
Well, and then there's the Jesus imagery with Red, where he's sort of hung up,
crucified, and
he's crucified and then stabbed in the side
by the spear or whatever. And the spear tip, the crazy knife.
Yeah, and then Jeremiah Sands himself saying that the mistake of Christ was that he didn't have somebody else sacrificed in his place. So there's a lot of Antichrist, a lot of Revelations level Jesus imagery coming down to smite the wicked and cleanse the earth.
This, man. You're kind of blowing my mind. I want to go back and watch it again. Because I just watched it recently, and I was thinking fantasy and Manson, but other films were influencing my thought process too. Because I was thinking Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because the book has definitely put a zap on my head because I'm thinking about the Manson murders and trials all the time too. And that was the first, but that's surface deep stuff. But the Bible stuff is definitely a fucking theme to the film, all the way through, because you can pick up on it, and it's also because it's so. Like I said earlier, how it's things that are equated like this are usually done with a sense of respect and class. And Mandy's definitely a classy horror movie for the most part. It's fucking disguised as schlock, but it's a fucking art house film through and through. You know what I mean? And profound thinking and stuff. Did you find most of this stuff online and how it is equated to? Or was
some of it was found online. I found one person's interpretation as far as correlating it with the Book of Revelations.
I was afraid to dig too deep into it because I wanted to watch it a couple times before and try to develop my own.
Because I could already see it with the Black Skulls. I was just well, those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse being called in by the horn and all of that, and then Red getting stabbed and.
That one's
and then
definitely
losing his wife and getting revenge for what happened to his wife. I
definitely fucking felt that was just because the Christ-like thing that's easily equated because he's stabbed in the same side Christ was stabbed on and strung up on the cross and stuff. Well, but I just thought that was an artistic choice.
Well, and then you go down to the chemist. And all of that and stuff that's going on with that character, and so you're okay, so we have the Antichrist, and then we have Christ, or we have the Reaper, we have death, coming for the world. Who's the chemist?
That's a good question.
And one of the interpretations is that the chemist is God.
I can see that because he's not. He's this set piece for most of these creatures that he's created. He's created the cult with his acid. He's created
he's created
evil.
The entire situation, and then he sort of sends forth Red. Yeah, the door cracked open a bit. The wind blew it open. But,
you got ghosts.
I got ghosts. Well.
Yeah, I can see that because it's his product that fucking brings forth the whole thing anyway.
Right.
As super strong imagery is chosen for his scene.
Yeah,
very different pieces.
That entire sequence and stuff doesn't even
it drastically.
It doesn't fit anywhere else in the movie.
It's so separate from the rest of the film, and the way it's even shot, and the way the camera tracks in, and looking at the tiger and stuff like that in the cage, and the way he shot is down up instead of top down at that point. You know what I mean? So it's definitely set with him in a sense of grand repose or whatever over the whole thing, and then he does nothing with the chemist. There's nothing shown with the chemist. That's it. It's only a brief meeting.
It's a brief meeting, and the chemist just gives him, tells him where to find Jeremiah.
That's it, and then that's it, and then the film continues on from there. But it's definitely put in there for a purpose. I could see that as being semblance of God. I could equate that to it because it's definitely inserted there on purpose.
Yeah.
Because it's so offbeat, and like the lady tells him where to find the fucking chemist, and he goes to him, and there's a whole scene where he's about to grab the Luger, and goes, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know who it was," and he's like, and he lets him in, knowing who he is, and he's like, "I'll show you where to find him." As he's dosing more acid, and he's dipping it with his hands, and like he's fucking off in La La Land. But that's all that comes to it. He releases the tiger, and I guess that's symbolism for him releasing Red upon the fucking rest of the world.
That's probably the most popular interpretation of it.
That's what I've got from it. Is that that's just it's heavy metal art cover. Release the tiger, and he's going to release the beast.
And it's implied that he uses the tiger as kind of his test subject for his stuff, and so letting the tiger go, he's like sort of him saying, he's like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Like
that's fair.
With the job that I'm doing right now, I'm done.
Right, because he does mention he knows it's good if
it's calm.
If the tiger's calm. Yeah, and then just leaves, and the film carries on, but it doesn't stop the pace of the film.
No.
And it just seems to drive the tension up. It ratchets everything up so much more before that scene. It was like perfectly inserted, you know what I mean? But it could fit in any other movie. Because up to that point, it's just like a bloodbath of him like slaughtering these creatures as he moves forward, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's some funny like use of effects in the movie, where you'll have like obviously like, you know, highly refined digital effects a lot of times in some parts and stuff, like a lot of the atmospheric stuff that they like to do.
Yeah,
you know, is a lot of you know, computer generated kind of imagery. But then you'll have other times, like whenever one of Jeremiah's people brought out you know, one of his relics and artifacts, there was always this weird like green strobe light, analog strobe light effect that they would show, where they would do a close-up on whatever it was and just flash a green strobe light over it, to kind of illustrate, they're like, oh, this is an object of great importance and evil.
That's the lighting is like a character in the film, also, because it's such, and it's weird because that's what I thought Color Space was going to be, because it uses color so powerfully and the lighting so dramatically, where it's like you don't even notice the color at some point, but it's has set this primitive mood on the film.
Yeah, it's you have the atmospherics of the film like so thoroughly established that you're like, okay, this is the aesthetic of this world, of this story.
Right, and it does so beautifully, man, because like even my favorite scene is one of my favorite scenes. There's a lot of favorite scenes in the film, but because at the end it's all red filter and he's covered in blood. And it's just this fucking it's fucking like iconic on how the whole thing fits together, you know what I mean? And then they have that cool matte painting drop at the end, which I assume is Saturn. Or
so yeah, that's one where nobody really knows what he was going for with that.
I don't know.
Some people are saying that it's him just sort of leaving the real world behind. It's
that's what I would equate it to, because he doses the acid. He doses the crazy acid, which the other ones say
now he can never go back. Yeah, he can't go back from that.
Yeah, and because that's why he's and it's left because like you don't. Not something you really want to have an end to, right? It's just him riding off into the sunset, but he's riding off into an alien sunset on another planet. That's what I equated it to, right? Like, that ending doesn't matter. It just opens up. Now you've opened up strange new ideas for yourself while you're interpreting and viewing it. So, like, you're left with that open scene of him driving off into an alien sunset, which is your feeling at the end of the film, because it's left you... It's exposed you to these deeper thoughts while you're watching the film, right? Like, for me anyway, like that's when I started exploring my thoughts on the film at the end, because I was like watching it so carefully on the first viewing, and I remember all these things, and I remember visually everything so strongly, and then that opening at the end is definitely like just felt like a good way to release you from the film,
right.
in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was just an artistic choice on how to leave that character. And I could dig that on him because you don't want to have like a fucking definite end for that character anyway. That's
and you notice like there's no sunlight in the movie after the Bill Duke scene.
Right, that's the last part because it's all dark afterwards, and then the red shading starts coming in.
Right, but there's no daylight ever again after that point, and they also imply that like this isn't something that he did in one night.
Yeah, it's several days.
There's several days and stuff of him going off on this vendetta. Is implied in a lot of ways in the film with him passing out and having his dream sequences and things where you're just like, yeah, some time must have passed. And I think like at most there's maybe some twilight, but there's no full on daylight ever again. And so it's kind of like that. So it never feels like he's in the real world anymore. After he's gone off on this vendetta, and so yeah, having him going off into the alien sunset at the end just sort of is the final clincher, where it's just like, yeah, no, nothing is normal ever again anymore for this guy after this.
I can. That's the only thing I equate it to, is because it's not just because the director's talking to you also.
Yeah.
While he's putting these kinds of things together, and the ending statement for this kind of film is he wants you to dig and do some interpretation for your own, which is like half of the fun of the movie is because you went fucking digging down the rabbit hole right away. Me, I just kind of let it vibe and was like, I gave it time and wanted to watch it again like I did. And like, I loved it even more the second time that I watched it. I do want to dig down and like I might watch some YouTube videos and stuff on it like you did, but I want to watch it again on my own. Like I did the first time, and just like surgically take it apart, time it, and look at stuff on my phone because I love timing the script and like the setting points of the movies and how it's edited together. And I noticed all those things without looking it up the first time because it's so cleanly clockwork set as his crusade begins moving forward. You know what I mean? I want to watch some of his other stuff. I'm wondering if it is this deep and like profoundly. It's almost startling because like once you start digging past the surface level, you know what I mean? And Cage was he was definitely on board with this whole thing. It's not like he did this as a shallow choice for a movie, you know what I mean? This is, in my opinion, this is his magnum opus, like his greatest role. It's definitely my favorite Nicolas Cage movie.
Yeah.
But this is like the Renaissance we were talking about, where he was like coming into this.
What was interesting was part of that behind the scenes is it turns out they originally wanted Cage to do Jeremiah Sand.
Ooh, that would have been interesting too.
And Cage came back and he was just like, well, reading through the script, he's like, I really connected with the Red character. So they were kind of going back and forth, and then they realized they're just like, we'd be crazy if we didn't have him
cast him as Red. Well, it's like the thing is he's so fucking good at these kinds of things, and it's not.
Well, and he takes what he does, just like very seriously.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the funny thing is people are like, oh, he's freaking crazy and stuff, and it's like, yeah, like to the extent that like somebody who takes what they do more seriously than other people.
He's just fucking super into it. Yeah,
he's just super into it.
I've always gotten from him.
Because that was another thing that they mention is what's his name? Jim Roach, Linus Roach.
Is that the director?
No, he's the guy who played Jeremiah Sand.
He was fucking great.
He was great. It was kind of funny because the thing I remember him from was my mom used to watch Law and Order all the time.
Oh, okay. So he was
he was one of the prosecutors in like the later seasons of Law and Order.
Interesting.
So it's kind of funny to see him in that and sort of a law enforcement lawyer role to playing this his Charles Manson kind of. His
dialogue
character.
Delivery was so sharp.
Yeah.
And so very unique, and it almost drowned out all the other stuff. His performance made everything like go off into the soft lighting in the background, which is shot like that on purpose. But you forget about everything around him when he's delivering his dialogue, and he delivers his scene, and he's so fucking starkly driven on his fucking point in the role. You know, he's super into it too, and Cage was super into it also.
Well, and so part of that is Cage like made a point and like told him, he's just like, we're not going to interact on set except for the scenes that we do with
fair.
Each other and stuff. But other than that, we're not going to mingle. We're not going to and stuff. We're just, the only interaction we're going to be having is as our characters.
I can see that,
and
dude.
that's the kind of thing is I've heard these stories a bunch of times about Cage, is that he tries to discipline himself in those ways, and you know, in ways that, you know, a lot of times people just look at it and it's just like, that's just freaking crazy. Like,
yeah,
what?
but it
like,
it helps him get into the mode. You know, dude.
Yeah.
I can see why he does it. Cage went up in the 90s, got better in the 90s, and was doing like stuff in the early 2000s.
In the early 2000s, yeah.
And most of these other guys
really
were like
high.
falling apart. Like Travolta, I would say is a stark contrast to Cage. Same kind of background running up, only he was the heartthrob. I kind of didn't know where the fuck he was going to go with it, and now like everything he's touched has been almost a running joke with Travolta. You know what I mean? And
Right.
Cage has managed to outrun that joke long enough to where people have forgotten about the joke. Now he's letting those indie films burn out and go out the door, because all the people who are making fun of him, they're not watching indie films. They're not watching stuff like Mandy.
No.
They're not digging for like the better stuff. You know what I mean? Which is all what the better movies are anyway. Like if you want something really good, you're gonna have to dig for like good stuff. Mandy's one of those.